Thank you, Aris. Good morning, everyone. It's really a great pleasure to be here and be part of this excellent collaborative between the CEPR, OECD Crete Center, and the Greek government. Yesterday, we spent much time discussing about remarkable rise in longevity, and I think what became clear to all of us is that while there are some cost, or it's often seen as a demographic challenge, in fact, people living longer can bring lots of benefits to our economy and societies. I think what also became clear is that these benefits are not going to be coming about automatically. We're going to have to change and radically rethink about our institutions that shape how we work, learn, and age. And this is not a novel thought that I've had overnight. The OECD has been advocating for these reforms, institutional reforms, over the last 30 decades. At least the earliest publication that I could find online, I'm sure there are some that didn't make it online, goes back to 1998 in a report on maintaining prosperity for an aging society, in which we said, meeting the challenge of aging populations will require comprehensive reform that address the fiscal, financial, and labor market implications of aging, as well as the implications for pensions, social benefits, systems of health, and long-term care. So this goes back around 30 years already. We then go on, sort of 10 years, well, another couple of years, in which we say individuals should be as free as possible to decide when they retire, so on and so forth. And fast forward, in a publication called Live Longer, Work Longer, we say in the face of population aging, a new agenda for reform is urgently required to improve the job prospects for older workers. So what I want to do in the next 20 minutes is spend a little bit of time in discussing, well, how well have we done? Have we actually made changes, and to what extent, and where remain some of the bottlenecks to really achieve some of the discussions and aspirations that we've been talking in the last two days. I want to start with this chart that I call the longevity versus work paradox. And what you see here is two different lines. In the top, you see the life expectancy at effective age of labor market exit. And at the bottom of the chart, you see the effective age of labor market exit itself. And what you see is that in the beginning of or at the end of the 20th century, early retirement just simply exploded. We started to do a little bit better, and labor force participation went up in the 21st century, but so did life expectancy. And so taken all together, at least all of the countries in the OECD, we've still failed to actually bring people back into the labor market and give them, or change the policies and reforms to set back to the levels we had seen in the 70s. And so I think the main message of this chart is that even though the policies have been changing, life expectancy is moving so fast, or has been moving so fast, that reforms and policies are still lagging behind. And so we're always still catching up with the speed in which the life expectancy has been increasing. And the paradox continues, and we discussed a lot about this yesterday, that labor force participation and bringing older people into the labor market is going to be one of the key aspects or tools to offset some of the negative effects of rapid population aging. But despite some of the success stories, of course, where in particularly what you see in this chart is that older women in particular have done very well in the labor market. Majority of the gains in terms of employment have come from older workers across the OECD, but we still see a huge decline at the age of 50, and this decline gets steeper as we get older, and when it comes to getting labor market opportunities for older individuals, even though we're living healthier and for longer. And this really just shows the disconnect, I would say, between how much work norms and employment practices are lagging behind the demographic reality. And it's not just participation in the labor market, I would say. A lot of it is about progression. And what you see here is simple data showing you the job-to-job and occupational mobility rates over the life cycle. And what we see is that basically job-to-job mobility or career progression simply just flattens out as we get older. Now, why is this bad? Well, it's bad because as we age, we might just want to rethink on what the jobs that we want, the occupations that we work in. And as we evolve, our health changes and our expectations towards work changes. And so we need to have the options to actually switch jobs even as we age. And the current system just doesn't allow you to do that. It's also about the changes in the labor market, the fact that AI and the transition to the green economy is going to be rendering some skills obsolete, and some jobs will simply not exist. And so we need to make sure that actually career progression or career mobility, which is much discussed when we're young, also needs to be part of discussions in mid-career and at older ages. And it's not just structural issues. Sadly, the societal and cultural attitudes towards working longer and being active still remain very negative and present. Here, what you see is the share of workers aged 45 and over who experience age discrimination in the workplace. And I think we can present this chart and data in very many different ways, and there's lots of survey data showing the fact that older workers, many of them report some sort of experience towards age discrimination, whether that's in terms of promotions or in training or in terms of hiring. These perceptions towards age discrimination tend to be very high. And I think what's very interesting is that when you look at this data, even going back 30, 40 years, it's one factor in the labor market that is always there. It has just simply not budged. The way society and employers think about the ability and the capacity of older workers. And not only that policy and reforms are not reflecting to the realities of 80-plus life expectancy, it also comes at a very expensive cost. And I think we discussed this yesterday, the fact that there's going to be a huge shrinking of the working age population in many of the OECD countries. And in some countries, we expect labor force to be declining as much as 30 to 40% in countries like Korea and Lithuania and Poland. And this is going to have clear negative impacts on our GDP as we reduce the labor input into the equation. And it's not just that, and I think Matthias made a reference to this yesterday, the fact that it has a cost to businesses, the fact that older workers and younger workers, when combined together, working together, there's a lot of evidence showing that actually the complementarities of these two different cohorts can in fact boost productivity at the firm level. So what needs to change, and what sort of institution and reforms we still need to make progress on this front? I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about lots of different policy pillars, which I think in their own right deserve a session in itself. And Lisa, I know, is going to be talking quite a bit around rethinking work and later retirement, so I'm going to move these through quite swiftly. Well, what is rethinking work and later all about? Well, I spoke about individual perceptions and age discrimination. Very sadly, it's also about institutional ageism, which is still very present from the 70s. The system, when we talk about employment regulations, such as employment protection legislation, or the way the social welfare system is designed, unemployment insurance, or some employer practices, such as seniority wages, which pretty much goes back to the 1970s, when the agenda was to push out older workers to make room for younger individuals, still remain in many countries, despite the evidence that age-specific hiring and firing rules can actually be costly and dampen their hiring effects. Unemployment insurance in 15 out of the 34 OECD countries, data shows that actually generosity of unemployment insurance increases exponentially by age. And while that can be beneficial and prevent people falling into poverty, and people need the means and the support to get back into the labor market, it also creates and reduces job search incentives. Similarly, seniority wages, I would say they have been declining quite a lot in many countries, but if we look at countries like Japan, Korea, but also Belgium and Germany, where you have very strong collective bargaining agreements, seniority wages still remain the norm, can also hinder hiring of older workers. And it's not just about labor market regulations. Job design and workplace policies also need to evolve with the changing realities in the of longevity. I think there's a sort of a fair amount of discussion we've had yesterday, but there's a consensus that actually older workers, like younger workers, would benefit from increasing workplace flexibility. It helps them to reconcile their health needs with working needs, but also combining childcare with caregiving and other caregiving responsibilities. But according to a survey that we ran with ARP 2 years ago, shows that actually older workers or mature workers aged 55 to 64 seem to have very few access to flexible work compared to their younger workers. And it's not just about flexibility in midlife, and we've had much discussion around pensions just in the earlier session, but also yesterday. It's also about giving opportunities for flexibility in terms of how do we actually retire if there is such a term as retirement, in the way if we think about devising longevity, it's about can we offer individuals the opportunity to gradually maintain their labor market attachment, but also support them to do other activities in their life. And this is an area where pension policy, we've spoken a lot about retirement ages, but I think where the bottleneck still remains is, in fact, how can we combine pensions with labor income, which remains actually quite a limited area, limited for many workers. So here you see the share of people aged 50 to 69 who continue to work at the beginning of their pension receipt. And what you see is that actually very few people take up these opportunities when they arise. And it's not just about the pension system, it's about improving financial literacy. Many people are still myopic and just don't know how much wealth they would have or how much income they would have once they retire. And many just don't plan in terms of how much they would need. And so I think this isn't just showing sort of the regulatory challenges and policies that we need to change, but it's also showing the missing link, which is about education and educating individuals, which I think the pension system hasn't really done so well in many OECD countries. So very quickly, I've said some of this before. I think what I want to focus on is not what can be done, but mostly actually bring your attention to a little bit of good practice that we've been collecting at the OECD, and this is our advantage to sort of facilitate and what we can learn from other countries. When we talk about flexibility, as we know, with population, with rising longevity, many people would actually need caregiving needs, and so in Lithuania, employers, there's a legislation where employers must grant unpaid leave to employees caring for a sick family for a duration up to 30 days. In the UK, in my home country, an initiative that I would say was born in the private sector, namely in the financial insurance sectors, to help their workers in midlife plan for their retirement, led to a national-wide initiative called the MOT, which pretty much stands for Ministry of Transport. The idea was the way we actually do an annual check of a car, we should also be doing an annual check of ourselves and our skills and our career aspirations. And so this midlife career review actually supports workers aged 45 and over in terms of their career planning, skills needs, and health and wealth. So it's quite a comprehensive tool in helping workers in their midlife. Another area that needs substantial rethinking is about corporate and business policies. It's an area that's pretty much overlooked, funnily enough, when we spend most of our time at work. And in fact, a lot of the policies at the employer level is something little that the governments can do. This is when we're talking about employers' attitudes and changing and encouraging them to think about the investments they need to be making in their aging, or let's say, aging or workforces. What is this about? I think a lot of this is about job quality, age-friendly jobs. Andrew, you've written quite a lot about that, and I think I just want to shed a light from a different perspective here. What this is showing you in this chart is the reasons why people switched jobs and the reasons why people retired early. And what we find is that the top 3 reasons for all workers, regardless of age, were the fact that they were paid low, so it's low pay. It's about feeling undervalued. It's also about lack of advancement in their jobs. Now, when we talk about, let's say, mid-career or older workers, the reasons are slightly different. So all these things do matter for older people, but what also matters is the fact that it's about experiencing health problems, caregiving, and poor working conditions. That could be physical work or other working conditions that are unsafe and unsanitary to be working in. And so this really shows you the array of different policy mix and the different types of job quality or job quality dimensions that one needs to be thinking about when we talk about retaining older workers in their jobs. And I think there's a lot of evidence suggesting that actually it's easier to retain than getting older people back into the labor market, because that's one of the hardest things. And I haven't seen a single country where we've successfully managed to bring older unemployed or long-term unemployed back into the labor market. So improving job quality and ensuring that actually jobs are catered towards the needs of older workers is going to be one of the key aspects in this challenge. It's also about integrating health and well-being at the workplace. This has come up again yesterday in terms of prevention and the role of health systems. We need to have healthy diets, exercise programs. All of that is necessary. It's critical. But I think we also need to be thinking a little bit wider. What is the role of workplaces and actually using the workplace as an intervention for prevention, but also supporting workers who already have chronic illnesses? And what you see in this chart is actually that the share of employed persons with chronic morbidity, which of course rises by age, but I would say that actually many of the mid-career and even younger workers actually have chronic illnesses. So it's not necessarily about just designing and having policy when you're older. If we can think through the life cycle, it can actually benefit lots of different age groups in the labor market and in the labor force. I spoke a little bit about this earlier, so I'm going to skip this slide. And this is just to sum up this section. We've run a survey 5 years ago among employers, asking them what share of employers actually have any of the policies that we think proven and would make sense in the context of an aging workforce. So things like mentoring or reverse mentoring programs, which can actually help overcome bias, but also facilitate cross-learning between different age groups, unbiased recruiting processes, re-entry, return-to-work programs. I mean, regardless of any of the programs that, that would make sense in the context of actually where older and younger people would come together, only 7% of the employers said that they have any of these programs. And so it's an area where I would say there's much room for public policy to actually support workers. Of course, some large employers have these policies in place, but a lot of SMEs do not have the capacity or the resources to actually implement these programs. And so there's much scope, both from the employer side, but also from the public policy side to support businesses to think about longevity at the workplace. Again, some couple of interesting initiatives around investments in well-being that come from Japan, and we know Japan is one of the front runners when it comes to thinking about and responding successfully to longevity, where large corporations complete a health and productivity survey and get tailored feedback for improvement. And I know some of these things seem quite light, and I think the idea really is to get businesses to start thinking about the changes that need to be making at the workplace. The Austrian government very recently has started to provide free counseling advice through their public employment services to create age-appropriate workplaces. Many employers just don't know what it means about designing working time policies or the kind of support that workers might need if they have a disability there. And so we do slowly start to see some changes in terms of public policy, but these are really far and few, and there's much scope to be done on this area. The last policy pillar, and I think this one is something that we're all aware of, is about the importance of education as a lifelong process. As we age, I think it's not just about getting resilient to the changes in the labor market, the fact that we'll need new skills as new jobs are created and giving people opportunities to benefit from, let's say, the AI and the green transition. It's also about giving them greater confidence. In a survey that we ran with a US NGO that provides training for mid-career and older workers, we found that actually many older workers lose their confidence in ability to find their work as they age. And so good education is also about boosting and reboosting confidence levels as we age. I mean, I think as we age, one thing that's happened in the last 40, 50 years is that we're all very familiar with having a lifetime employment system. I mean, if we were suddenly finding ourselves at the age of 50 or 55 to re-switching or reskilling and finding a new job, we just don't know how to and where to get started. And so I think a lot of it is about boosting confidence of older workers, and this is where the education system can play a huge role. I spoke quite a bit about sort of career progression, and again, what is fascinating about the education system is that it's still very much geared towards the younger individuals, rightly so, but really has failed, and it's very myopic in terms of the longevity gains we've seen over the life cycle. So when we ask individuals, older workers compared to the younger workers, far few of them would say that they actually regularly review options for job or career changes. So even though a lot of governments have been putting in place career guidance systems, most of them are actually targeted towards younger individuals rather than mid-career and older workers. And according to the latest survey of adult skills across the OECD, which was just launched last year, there's a bit of a good news that sort of, participation in skills and training by age across all age groups have gone up. But in every single OECD country, older workers tend to participate far less compared to their younger counterparts. And I think despite the rhetoric and the huge public debate and investment in public policy in terms of improving and bringing older people closer to labor markets and lifelong learning, it's something that we need to be working on continuously and for a long time. And I think these sort of disparities in participation in training are showing pretty much two things. It's not just, again, the lack of availability of training. It's also actually individuals themselves. Many older individuals feel training is not worthwhile as soon as you reach the age of 55 or even 60 because of the perception of leaving the labor market early on. And so in some countries, we see quite a few initiatives about giving paid training leave. For instance, in Belgium, for many older workers, if we have a full-time job, it's actually difficult to train in something else, and we also have a family. And so, again, far and few, but actually in the private sector, employers are giving older workers paid training leave where they can actually take time off from work while getting paid to actually participate and upskill and reskill. In Singapore, similarly, the government is offering the mid-career enhanced subsidy to encourage mid-career workers to reskill and upskill, covering 90% of their training cost when they attend vocational and university institutions. So in this, like I said, I think all of these different dimensions merit and are big topics in their own right. And so this was a little bit of a snapshot in terms of where institutions need to be changing and where we lag behind and where there are some pockets of good practices coming about. And so conclude, I would just say that I think employers must rethink inclusion. It's not just that we're aging, workplaces are also aging, and a lot of the policies don't need to be necessarily thought about older workers versus younger individuals. What we find is that when it comes to attitudes towards work and what people want from work, the attitudes of younger and older workers are pretty much the same. Everybody wants a job that pays well, that gives you flexibility, and where you're valued. It's also about creating more flexibility, flexibility in terms of our jobs, but also how we want to retire and when we want to retire. And lifelong learning as a core infrastructure. This is a backbone, I would say, and it's something that not just enables you to participate in the labor market or helps you stay engaged, it's going to help you stay engaged in social activity, but also political and other dimension. And as we know, a lot of research showing that upskilling, reskilling, learning new things can actually also enhance cognitive behavior. And last but not least, I think we need to be involving all stakeholders, including social partners and businesses. I was in Belgium just last week, where we just heard from the social partners that actually they've developed something called the Demography Fund, which is a scheme to really, a sectorial specific scheme to help older workers switch from one sector to another sector. So there's a lot of innovation, a lot of good practices happening between social partners that are just being missed out from us, that we ought to be following and tapping into in terms of learning good practices. So with that, I'll conclude and thank you very much.